Alright, so in this video we're talking turnarounds, and I just want to go through a couple of things to think about. So to start out, right here I have a super basic character just as a way to get us thinking about A, rotations, and B, using simplified shapes and forms to make it easier for us to turn in our brains, turn on the page, really advocating for thinking about how you can use just simplified shapes. So in this instance, I have a character from the front comprised of a box. And I'm working in Photoshop. I've turned my rulers on by going to View and Rulers, or Control R or Command R if you're in a Mac. And so with this, I would do my front one first, so that way I know what my character looks like straight on. And then I would move to the side. And this is important because you want to think about how the character, when they're facing away from you, when you're going to do your 3/4 turn, how you can see how far their head goes back, or do they have a tail, right? And so I have my side here, and notice that if I just did this at a 3/4 turn, right? Let me go to a different brush. If I were to do this at a 3/4 turn, let's go hard round. And let's go to that. Right? If I didn't know that the head took up this amount of space on either side, then I would probably draw my 3/4 turn, right, with my head just sort of in almost a square fashion, right? But because this head is a little bit longer, because I've done my side portrait first, right, I know it's going to be a little bit longer in this dimension compared to this one, right? So this is why we're going to do the front, side, and back first before we get to the 3/4 turn. Same sort of thing, right? If I were to look at my character from the side, I'm going to go to a slightly darker color. If I were to look at my character from the side, I see that they have a tail. But notice that I don't have that information on my front image, right? So if I were to turn them without the tail and look at my 3/4 turn, right, I would just imagine that they don't have anything here. But because I know they have the tail, right, it's going to look something like this. But one thing to watch out for, right? What if this tail doesn't actually start? I don't know where this piece starts yet. That piece could start a little bit further inset, right? It could start there as opposed to on the outside. So we would do the back pose next. Also notice that now I know how far these buttons stick out, right, when I do my 3/4 turn, because they could hypothetically stick all the way out this way or all the way out this way, right? So we want to think about how we can make it easier for ourselves so we have all the information before we get to the more difficult pose. I would then do the back, right? And so from here I can actually see, oh, that this whole thing is inset a little bit. It doesn't actually touch this edge. Notice that the tail here is not actually on top, right? It is inset into that area. So this is something to think about. And when I'm making my back, front, and side, I would do these directly on top of this character here. And what I mean by that is, when I start out, I've got my front, he's here, I'm going to turn down the opacity, and I might lock this layer so that way I can actually see it there. And then when I'm inside my side, I'm going to, just as a demo, let's turn that on, side 2, right? I'm going to start out so that way I know exactly where these elements are. Let me reduce the size a little bit, right? I know I want to match that area here because that's the top ledge. Go down, because I'm thinking, okay, I know that this character is about that size. These guys, right, are going to come out as far as I want or as shallow as I want. And then here is where I think about the sort of neck. And something to think about is how you think about the ratios, right? Like here, it's exactly in the center, right? The neck is inside the center of the shoulders. So I could, I could have it way up in the front. Make it easy. I'm gonna have it in the center here as well, so it's like a normal sort of head. Have this start a little further back and go up, go there, and notice that I'm matching all of those different parts. Legs, centered inside here. I'm holding shift to go down. Photoshop in some ways doesn't do what Procreate or other programs will do, where you can have that line beating. So it's drawing a little bit extra. So here, same thing, like I made this leg so it actually looks, so it would be sort of square there, but I don't have to do that. I could make this leg a little bit longer or wider in this direction. So these are all sort of important things to think about as you're going. I would then take this, Command T, pop it over. And this is where I start to use my rulers just to double check some things, right? I'm going on super simple, and we're going to look at another complicated example, but I've already got a bunch of guides. I can drag it directly down from the top, and it will leave a guide. And so notice I've got my elements set up, matching here. Oh, I messed up on that one. I'm going to erase, come back, go inside here, go inside here. I can see that. Let's bring this one up, right? Bring this down, making sure that those match. And because I did it directly on top of my previous character, I know I know it's gonna be correct. But this is where, when we get to 3/4 turn, a little bit helpful. So I would also do the back on top of the character as well, just so it's in the correct pose. Now, I'm gonna bring this guy back, right? And so here you can see I had that little bit of a wider element. Now I would do my 3/4 directly on top. You can hide your guides, view, guides, and if you want to get rid of them, completely clear guides, or you can do show guides, and it's Control or Command semicolon, either one. So when I have my 3/4 turn, this is where I have all of this information about the tail, about the size or width of the legs, about the size of the head, and I'm using this idea of turning in space. So there is going to be some foreshortening. So with this guy, I would have done this directly on top of my character here, right? And because some elements are going to be turned in space, if I look at this, let me push this over just a tiny bit. Notice that because I turned it, right, there's foreshortening happening. And since I simplified this idea to a cube, it makes it a little bit easier, right? So here, notice that this top of the shoulder and the bottom of the bottom of the body is going to be a little bit longer, right? Because I'm turning in space, and this area is foreshortened. So we're seeing this, right, as a cube going in space. And because I know how long to turn or how far to turn these out, right, I want to think about this is straight on. If it's turned in space, I want to use an ellipse. And these are just really sort of simple details to think about. Same thing with the head here, right? I want to, maybe I need to go back a little bit more in space to stay sort of even or parallel with this since it is cubed, right? Going down. And because I know that the tail here is towards the middle of the body, right? It's not going to meet the bottom here, right? If we look at this, it looks like it's even, but because I know inside the back area here, inside the back view, that tail actually starts on the inside. I don't want it to fully start. Let's actually just go to black. I don't want it to fully start using L to highlight. right? It wouldn't start like that. There would be more sort of dimension to it. I can also look at this and see that this area here is thinner than this one. And again, this is why we're doing the side view. So I'm thinking about those sort of relationships, right? This sort of angle that it goes up, if it were thicker, it would start wider and go back, right? And that would mean that this area here, whoop, I need to actually go to that layer. I'm looking at my side view. That would be here, right? So you can go back and forth depending on the sort of like character adjustments you need to make, but hopefully this gives you some ideas around simplifying your shapes and forms, right? If, for example, I had my character was a little bit simplified, or sorry, it was not simplified, right? Was a little bit more complex. And so in my front one, right, what if their shoulders actually curved like this? Like sort of more normal sort of forms, or their bottom of the body, right? Had that sort of form. Then when I get to my 3/4 view, let's just turn this down a tiny bit. And let's turn that one off, right? Now, when I'm thinking about this, let's go back to 3/4. There we go. If this was actually curved, then I would be able to come up here and I can think about how dot going inside. So this is going to then be curved there. This is going to be curved there. And I'm thinking about those sort of dimensions inside the box. So this is nice because then I can come back to here, erase this out, erase this curve out, erase this top area, erase this top area, get rid of this bottom area a little bit, right? And so now I've got more, right, starting to get towards that body form. So again, thinking about this as an example of just the purest sort of simplification of a body, and going from when you have a full sort of torso going across, right? You might have the lower sort of rib cage and, or sorry, the hips of a character. And you can sort of think about that space between them, right? So center of the body going down. Simplify your shapes and forms. That's what I'm advocating for. And it'll help give you a better sort of understanding of the way that the body bends and the body moves around. In the next video, I'm going to go over a more example that I think will be a little bit more helpful for you as you're working. So watch the first one, then come to this one.